Again, who's ADP quickly, right? It's a software as a service company. It's a payroll company, right? We pay 1 in 6 employees in US, 1 in 4 employees in Canada, and similar numbers across the world. So pretty big company, more than 300,000 clients using the cloud, more than 700,000 clients in general, more than 18 million active users out of the 48 million that we pay. We're in 81 countries and expanding. So, and the mandatory awards lie there. Again, a couple of pressures that really made us move into having a powerful search on our products, right? I mean, expanding global workforce, we need to be global, and search becomes important when you have multinationals with hundreds of thousands of employees inside one given company. So that's pretty big for us, and it needs to be multilingual as well. The need to integrate and simplify. Usually on a company you have 8 different HR systems, one doing talent, one doing payroll, one doing training, whatever it is, and becomes complicated. But as we put them all together under ADP, I hope all of you, it becomes quite a big bundle of applications to deal with. And then the amount of data, the amount of documents, the amount of tasks that you have becomes something that you need to search, right? It's just like the internet before Google, I think, as Andy said it this morning. You used to know all the WWs, and then you needed something like Google. Also, again, the workforce. I mean, people are used to search, right? It's different than, at least I'm older than that. But I hate this demographics here because, knowing that half of the employees that we deal with now are born after 1977, it's very depressing, at least for me. But again, I mean, that demographic was born in the age of Google, and they're used to search. I mean, that's what they do, right? They don't go through menus and other artifacts. So we need to change. And mobile, right? I think mobile is important, and search is a critical component. There's no way to display. Like, if you have all the offerings from ADP, your menu might have more than 1,000 options in there, right? So quite hard to navigate. Search becomes mandatory. If you try to put 1,000 lines of menu on a mobile device, it's quite complicated, not very user-friendly. So we need to react to all of that. I run the ADP Innovation Labs. This is it's a small organization within ADP on purpose by design. We never will be bigger than 20 employees at any given time. We work on a maximum of 4 to 5 initiatives at a time, not more than that. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin. And again, the idea is it's a little different than your corporate America. It's really a lab. It's open space. People come, they sit wherever they want to sit. Big collaboration area, so no cubicles, none of the sort of the standard corporate stuff. And the idea is to research and incubate solutions, right? So the mobile solution that you see, if you're paid by ADP, you can go to the App Store, Google Store, whatever, download the app. That came out of the lab. Pretty interesting sandbox that we use for a bunch of our projects as well. We have more than 1 million users on that, so pretty exciting to see mobile as one of our primary channels to give access to data and transact with ADP, right? So again, what are the main areas that we're researching or incubating on the lab today for ADP? It's the idea of personal cloud. I'm not going to talk about that today, but this idea that, independent of the media, independent of what you're doing, you need to have this continuum on your experience. So as we launch our tablet app in the summer, you will see some of that, right? You can start a transaction on the desktop, pick up your tablet, it will be exactly where you left. Pick up your mobile, be exactly where you left. So that continuum of experience, which is quite important. I mean, we're driven by interruption today, right? Either email, tweet, phone call, whatever. So having that fluidity on the user experience is very important. Another one is social platform. I mean, we're working actively. We think, HCM or payroll is the place to host some of the social artifacts on an enterprise. global system of record. As we said, we have a presence in close to 100 countries, so global is very important for us. A lot of initiatives on that particular area of research. Mobility, as I said, but the one that we're going to focus today is what we call the pillar of big data, analytics, and search, and we're going to focus specifically on search. Some of the stuff we're doing with big data and BI on that pillar, because that also kind of makes an influence on search. Some of the initiatives that we collaborated within ADP on big data is, I don't know how many of you heard, but ADP puts out this what is called the National Employment Report. That's why the markets are down today, probably, because April was not good. And we usually put that 2 days before Department of Labor. I don't know if this is being recorded, but we're usually more accurate than they are. And the idea here is, again, we crunch all the data, right? As we pay 1 in every 6 employees in America, we have a pretty good pulse in what's happening, right? Who's getting fired, who's getting hired. And we break that down by geography, by industry, by size of company. So pretty cool. Put out like a nice infographic every month. And for that, I don't call big data, it's really large data. Because it doesn't have some of the V's, right, to be called big data. But we crunch all those numbers and we put out this nice report out there, which is a good resource for our clients. And it's a public thing, so you can go and just take a look at it. We're obviously doing BI like anyone else, right? And this is an area that it's very interesting for us. A lot of problems, right, in this area. We can do pretty good BI within one company, right? Within one domain, because we know the taxonomy. That client knows their own taxonomy, right? But the problem is that different than a lot of industries that have a strong body that creates the taxonomy for jobs, right? My company might call a senior developer, you call a principal engineer. It's the same job, but we call completely different names, right? So the big thing about BI, and that's one of the areas of research, and we're even working with IBM and trying to see if Watson can help on that, is how do we make sense of all the data, right? How do we create how we connect these jobs that have nothing to do in terms of, the nomenclature of the job, to be able to benchmark across companies, right? To be able to say, you're paying this much and other companies in your same geography are paying this much, right? Or you're giving this particular benefit package and others are doing this and that. But it's very hard when you don't have a normalization of the data. And that's one area of research that we have pretty active in the labs today, and very hard problem to resolve, to tell you the truth. And that's the big value on BI, right? If you can compare or benchmark data between 2 different companies. Another area that we're doing on big data is we learn a lot from our mobile project, right? I mean, having millions of users and them coming on that's the good thing about they stick with us because they get paid by us. So every week or every 2 weeks they come and look at their paycheck, right? At least that. A lot of them clock in from the mobile device, so we get a couple of visits a day from all of them. And one of the things that we did with big data is what we call behavioral intelligence, right? So we capture every impression that you do on the mobile, and we're starting to do the same thing with our desktop applications as well. So every time you tap on something, right, or you stay on a page, you don't close the app or whatever, we capture that. We put all that on a database. On a Hadoop in this case, we crunch those numbers via MapReduce, and we basically learn from you. It's a little creepy, right? So we know when you're using, what are you using. But the cool thing is that then we can proactively push all this information into memory before you even ask for it, right? So I know that Mary will come and look at her pay and 401k today at around 9, 10 a.m. She always does that on a Wednesday. And so we push that all the way to the edge of our servers. And if you are on Wi-Fi, we're going to push all the way to your device. I don't want to consume your bandwidth, but we push all the way to. So even before you went in and look for your payroll, the payroll's there already, right? Or the 401k balance is there, right? So pretty cool stuff on the side of big data specifically. So that's just what we're doing with big data. So what is this semantic search, right? So on semantic search, the idea is, the mission we had was to start doing search across the enterprise, across all document types, right? Up until then, what ADP had on their applications, were what we call narrow search. You had to select an object and then say, I want to search for employee John, right? Or I want to search for, whatever other object, right? An applicant or a department or a document, a form, and then you put the predicate, so very narrow search, right? So the mission was, can we go and search across multiple objects? And the answer obviously is yes, right? And so we started looking into that. And we said, I think we can do better than that. I think we can actually start adding semantics to the predicate, to analyzing that predicate for more than just the nouns, right? So the idea is, again, that service should go across all products and clients, which is a big deal here, right? And I'll talk about multi-tenancy in a minute, right? Search as the primary navigation tool. So the idea is, instead of going to menus, right? And then, usually menus are very much a verb, right? What I want to do. And then if you click on a menu, you usually have to then select your subject, your noun, right? So it's funny because when you're developing, you have methods and classes all kind of together, right? It makes sense. And when you expose that to the user, we keep that very separate, right? Methods sit on the menu, and classes you decide once you have decided the method. Kind of twisted and wrong. So we said, why don't we put them two together on the search, right? So the idea on the search is that we should be able to search both for verbs and nouns. And more than that, them together. They need to make sense, right? Some of the key architecture elements on the search was it needs to be multi-tenant. And that's something that, Lucene and Solar was pretty bad at. Right? It's still not perfect, but it was pretty bad at it. I mean, Lucene and Solar is great if you have just like one actor, right? And the whole database is made for that consumer, right? So perfect for, like a shopping cart, right? Or searching for products, right? If you are a software as a service in the cloud, which everybody is becoming, right? I mean, ADP has been doing that for several years. And you're serving different tenants, different clients, using the same architecture, the same cluster, that becomes a big issue, right? You don't want employees from Coca-Cola showing at Pepsi-Cola, right? That would be just wrong. So how do you segregate that, right? How do you don't spawn like, thousands or hundreds of thousands of Solar, installs, one for each client, right? So we work with the community and with Lucidworks as well on what's now kind of the ability to change your shard keys, right? Or to at least put a portion of the shard key to be an element that you control. So this is on the latest Solar, I think, on Solar Cloud and Solar 4. And the idea now is that when you define the key that will be the key to separate the shards, you can say tenant ID, right, and then a separator, and then the document ID itself. And that's awesome because now we can segregate the data into this kind of logical segments on the index, right? And more than that, I mean, before, if you fire a query against Solar, right, it will go to all shards because you don't know where that is, right? In our case, you know where the data is. The data belongs to that particular tenant, right? So with the artifacts of having now this shard keys being sort of like, control, you can send that query just to the shard that contains the data, instead of having to send to all shards and then aggregate the results to send it back. Right, so it makes a lot of sense and increases the performance tremendously. We still have an issue with multi-data center, right? I mean, if you experiment with replicas, right, you know that, you add one replica, you basically go down to 40% of your performance in terms of ingesting documents. If you add a second one, another 22% lost. So it's pretty dramatic if you use replicas. If you put that on a separate data center, on a remote data center, because Solr is very, it doesn't give you an option, right? It's always consistent, which is good, but sometimes it's not good. It kills you. So it's still a problem that we need to address, unless someone knows some trick here to be able to run like, a cluster where you have certain replicas on a separate data center that are eventually consistent, right? Because sometimes it's okay to be eventually consistent. We have a large number of sources, right? We need high availability. We need crawling and indexing with that high availability. And we would love to be active, but for that we need to resolve what we just said, right? Which is to have replicas on separate data centers without losing the performance, right? On a lot of other applications, like the mobile one I show, we use Mongo, for example, right? And that gives you the knobs to say, put a replica here, but make it eventually consistent. It's okay if I lose a couple of seconds on that baby, and it's fine. Right, I mean, and search is usually a cache, right? It's an index of something that the system of record is there back somewhere, right? So it's probably okay if I lose data, right? I just recrawl from the last crawling that I did, right? So that would be a good thing to have on Solr. Some key functional design elements, right? We want to be instant. We want to have partial text and phrase match, highlighting, all the normal things. Some of the things that really still are not resolved, right, is like relevance. If you have this multi-tenant view, relevance becomes irrelevant because it doesn't matter that Coca-Cola it's searching for John a lot and getting all those documents for the other tenant, right? For PepsiCo or client A, client B. So resolving, having that view of the tenant as a complete separation, it's quite important. So we came up with this idea, right, of doing the semantic search. And how we did that, right? So the idea is that we can now understand verbs and nouns. So you can go to search now and say, hire John Doe. And you understand that hire is a verb that relates or applies to a type of object of candidate. Do I have any candidate with the name John Doe on it? And if yes, you can invoke an action. So the idea is more than search being a place to find objects. Search becomes a place to initiate actions, right? Really a navigation artifact that can give you that ability to just go and start a process. So we really see as a new navigation paradigm, right? We're using that on iOS as voice command, so it's pretty cool, almost like a Siri thing. It's simpler and faster than trying to implement NLP, right? NLP is complicated, it's fuzzy. Not saying that we're not gonna be there someday, but I think just doing this, our clients are really, really delighted with just this possibility of searching on nouns and tasks, right? And we also capture every time you go do a search by character, and we calculate relevance and taxonomy by tenant as well for you. The way we did this is that we put a separate index on the side, right? So the idea is every time a user, goes search provides a query, we sequentially fire that query against a metadata index. That's easy for us, right? And probably easy for most of the companies. For Google, this is very hard, right? I mean, because their taxonomy is the universe, right? I mean, they index everything, right? We have a fairly limited domain, right? We are in the HCM on human capital management, payroll, benefits. So our taxonomy is quite limited, right? But I think in a lot of use cases that is the reality. So what we do is that we basically distill all of our menus, right? Those thousands of things that you can do into verbs and the noun of that verb, right? So if I'm gonna give you if I'm gonna do your performance evaluation, you say, okay, performance evaluation, and then all the synonyms that are possible for that particular verb, right? And then the subject of that verb, the noun is an employee because I do performance on an employee, right? And that is what populates the metadata index. So very simply, I mean, I can even show some of you the schema for that. But basically, we fire the query against this metadata first. We get the results, and then we manipulate the predicate when we go to the real index data, right? We enrich the predicate with those elements. So the story of a query, this is a little bit of an eye chart here, but the story of a query starts here. First thing we do when you start a query is that we fetch your user profile. The other thing that is very important at ADP is access control, right? What can I see? I mean, it doesn't get any more sensitive data than ADP, right? Social securities and salaries and and benefits and all that. So that is extremely important for us. So the very first thing we do is to fetch your user profile to understand what you have access to, right? And that's a combination. It's a bitmap that we created that basically is a combination as a key that we match against a bitmap that sits on the document, right? Then the other thing we did is that on our business, always looking from the user, right? Always trying to understand what is the best way to do search from a user perspective, not from what we can do from a technical or from a server's perspective. On HR, things are very seasonal, right? I mean, I'm dealing with this employee on his performance, or I'm doing a promotion for this guy, or I'm working on vacation or time off request for that other one. So one of the things we did is that we search before we use search, basically, right? So if you just put your cursor on the search box, we're going to give you the last results, the last relevant results that you acted upon, even if you don't type anything, right? We use instance, so if there is, if you have something on your query predicate, then we start the process of going through the meta search, right? We build that main search predicates, we add the semantic search predicates, and then we look at the tasks and we create the task search, and that's what we fire against the search service, the main index. So the meta search fires against the search, the meta index, and then once we have the predicate constructed, we go against the search itself. And then we do a bunch of post-processing, right, on the pipeline, right? So we do the boosting by task, because always tasks are more important than objects. We trim the results, we apply the highlights, and we generate the invocable actions. And that's what it gets, fired back to the user. We distill all this complexity into a very simple set of APIs, right? First one is what we call warm-up. That's a courtesy call. We ask our UI to do. So the idea here is whenever a user logs in our system, we ask that system, right, to call us with a warm-up. What we do there is that tells us this user is coming. Be ready. Right, so you already get your access control. We push that to memory, right? We build that bitmap that is the key to do the access control on the documents, right? And so basically it's just to warm up the search engine in a way that when the next query comes, we're ready to go. We already have all your profile built in memory, and your last clicks or last results also built in memory. Then we have the get search, which is very simple, right? You can pass the query. You can say that you just want one particular document type. And if you send with an empty query, we give you the last results. Simple things. We're simple people there, right? And then finally, if you click on something, we ask them to tell us, right? We ask the guy that is developing the UI to say, if they click on a result, tell us that they click on the result, right? Because that's important for us. And we also capture all positive and negative queries, right? So if they search it and never click on anything, we put that on a MapReduce to try to see if we're missing anything on the metadata, right? Because maybe they use a term that we don't understand, right? So again, what was out of the box, right, from Solar, right? Obviously, all the text using, the index using inverted index, the REST APIs, the, query execution, fuzzy search using n-grams and phonetics. the grouping, the faceting, the highlighting. Although we had to open a bug on highlighting, we use a lot of arrays as the value for fields, right? And highlighting was only it was dropping the values that were not highlighting. So that's another thing that we work with the community to fix. And again, we use multilingual search. And this is the stuff that we have to sort of custom, right? I mean, the multi-tenancy, as I said, the access control, which would be great to have something out of the box, right? Again, the instant search was regular in terms of Solr, but we had to put a lot of code behind it. Dynamic relevance, because again, as I said, relevance across the tenants doesn't matter for us. We need to see that from within a tenant. We did the synonym enrichment as well in the metadata, and kind of the list goes on here. So I think better than, it's to show, right? So let me do a quick demo here if this ever works, given all our monitor issues. So let me see, there we go. It almost works. So one of the things, let me reduce this a little bit. So this is just a sandbox that we have kind of to show the search, right? And so one of the things, as I said, right, the first thing that happens is there is no search button, right? So you just put the cursor on the search, and it will give you the recently viewed employees, right? The cool thing is, again, when you start to use it, as we said, with the semantics. So again, it's instant. So if I type John, you will see all employees, all applicants, right? All of the documents that have John, including locations on Lyndon Johnson Boulevard, all with highlights. As you can see, we use the facets not as a search, not as a filter, but we just put them in line. And based on relevance of results, we trim the results to whatever number of entries you want, right? So a little different UI than most of the people do. Then you can say John docs, right? And it will give you the document. So now you're starting to see, it doesn't need to be a verb, but it's the semantics of it, right? So it understands that docs is part of the taxonomy. I know what it is. And then it gives me tasks now, direct links to say, look at employee documents for Johnny Johnson and Alexander Johnson, right? Even cooler is when you start to really kind of, do the, hire John. Right? And because hire you do on applicants, it changes the relevance of that document type, right? So now instead of employees being on the top, you see applicants being on the top because you hire applicants, you don't hire employees, right? And it gives you direct links already to go and just go hire employees. If there was only one John, this would be directly firing the application, right? So you can type, you can really try to trick it, right? And say hire John and then fire, right? And it gets a little crazy, but it understands that you're trying two things at the same time. It will give you the two options, right? It understands the semantic of fire. And by the way, fire, as you can see, it's using the synonym, right? So it's saying terminate, right? Nothing to do with fire, but it's just using the metadata index to get the real term, and then the object that it's related to it, right? And then you can do cool things because we're just controlling the predicate, right? And say, who's my team, right? And it understands the concept of team, and it say there are some tasks related to team, like org chart or delegation of approvals. But by the way, here's your team. So it now went to the employee, document type, and understanding that team is a concept on my metadata, it enriched the predicate to say, give me all the people that report to you. Yes?
Then why I'm saying the applicant for the team?
Because there might be applicants with team on their name or that have a skill of team leading. Right? It still goes across, but it plays with the relevance, right? The most important things will come on the top. Always the task, always all the employees that are part of your team, and then all the other stuff, right? There might be other objects that have that particular text on their documents, right? So always you got to look. It's like Google, right? Nobody goes to the second page, right? You just stay on the top. So you can do things like that. You can do things like, who are my peers, right? And you understand peers. So now you're seeing, the people that are peers of you. And then you can say, you can do like, John time, and it gets the time is, it will give you both, time entry, approved time for Johnny, all of that. So really, really easy to, to kind of navigate the system, even with this database. And you can see that even with 2 sequential queries on Solar, right, on Lucene, we're still in like, 57 milliseconds, right? It's usually, that's the average, like 60 milliseconds per query. And by the way, this is instant, right? So every time I type a character, right, you see that it changed to time off now, right? Because I said time o, right? So every character is actually firing true queries in sequence, right? One against the metadata and one against the data index itself. So, and again, it's easy as that. I mean, we do support multiple language. So, I think if you go Portuguese, that's what I talk, right? I mean, I'm from Brazil, moving in here 10 years. That's why the accent. But that's the idea. We translate. We don't translate the data itself, but all the predicates. And if you are just interested in one particular facet, right, just clicking on the facet, we'll give you all this. These are the only tasks. But if I'm only interested in employees, you'll see all the employees for that facet. So very easy UI, very easy to select what you want, filter just to one document type, and then go from there, right? So again, that's the demo. Let me go back to my presentation. If this works, it does, right? Again, and we're using that dramatically now on our tablet. So search is becoming a first-degree citizen on the tablet as well. We're not going to have menus on the search. And one of the things that we're doing on the tablet as well, which is pretty cool, is that we're starting to enrich the predicates with sensors, right? So we already know who, but we're starting to change the predicates, or it's kind of crazy. We're enriching the metadata with geolocation as well. So depending on where you are when you're searching, the results will change, right? So if you're visiting a particular branch of the company, right, and you search for John, the employees on that particular branch will be more relevant, right? So we're geotagging the objects based on where you are, right, and all the other sensors, right, including proximity, right? I hope that Apple also puts NFC on their devices, because with Android it's pretty cool, right? Because we actually boost people that are around you. So if you're in a meeting, you do a search, the people that are around you are more relevant than people that are not. So pretty cool stuff. And again, the idea here was always, right, to say, don't design from what you have, right, and then push it to the user, right? Really invert that cycle, right? I mean, what is the way the user thinks, right? I mean, he doesn't think about objects and tasks and nouns and verbs. He just constructs what he wants to do, right? He just say, hire John, fire John, or time off for Anna, approve time off, whatever the heck it is, and that's the way the user thinks. So try to really mimic that. And so finally, to get to that quadrant, right? I mean, we don't want complex, we want intuitive, we don't want insecurity, we want fully confidence on the user to create that engaging UI that the user feels confident about using, right? So that's what I had. Hopefully, I don't know what time it is because my clock is still on the East Coast time. So. All right, thank you, guys.